Why are you crying?
Just shut the fuck up, all right?
You shouldn't have lied to us.
I didn't lie.
Yes, you did. You said you were married.
I am married, just not to him, and I do have a daughter, Emma.
You know those movies you tend to watch when you don't really feel like thinking? Films that tend to have a simplistic plot involving aliens or a shark or something, lots of people die in relatively violent ways, and by the end you're confident you've wasted your time. This is what I expected with the film Circle, as it was described to have most of these qualities. A bunch of people in a room being killed off one by one, and an alien theme. However, it proved to be something quite different. Upon viewing it, I realized that despite the deaths being rather simplistic, there is a lot of it. Lots of death. Fact is, most of these people you don't even get to know. They're just there to keep the plot going. This might sound lazy, considering the fact that most of the movie takes place in one area, but in my opinion, there's a lot more to it. See, as the plot progresses, the rules of the deadly game are revealed, and a voting system is implemented, in which they choose who dies next. Top that off with an innocent kid and a pregnant woman, and it becomes a plot about survival and humanity. Perhaps a movie that makes you question, what would you do in this situation? Or you might be asking, is this movie actually worth watching, or time better spent with a different mindless film? Let's find out as we analyze Circle. We open in the aforementioned dark area with the aforementioned circle of people sleeping while standing. Never really explained, until one of them wakes up and makes contact with the only other person who's currently awake.
Don't move. They can see us.
You know this how? Nobody else does. I mean, you're probably being watched, but who's they? A third person wakes up and is killed after stepping off her respective circle. After that, the game officially begins. Still don't know how that worked, and somebody immediately tries to escape and dies.
Everyone freeze!
Oh my god!
They can see if we move.
Yes, the all-important information guy prefers to use example. Prove that moving isn't allowed. Not like they'd actually listen. But we're never gonna know how he knew all this because he's the next to go. So much for it being fine. Then the plot thickens as they come to the realization that they can control the arrows and vote on who dies next. However, they obviously didn't do this for the previous death, meaning somebody dies regardless and there's no stopping it. But that doesn't mean they can't try. First, they attempt to vote for the dead woman, which fails. Then, they simply try not voting at all, which once again fails. So, the obvious dickhead devises a somewhat controversial plan to stall for time by only voting for the elderly.
That should buy us 10 minutes.
No.
Minus the time you spent discussing it. And the voting. The problem is, this doesn't really get them anywhere, apart from confirming the fact that it was aliens, as some of them remember being beamed up. However, somebody has an even more interesting theory.
And they spoke, too. It sounded almost like Chinese.
You could have just stuck with basic alien language, they might have believed that. But since he was up next to die, they assumed that was bullshit. But the next person up causes a bit of confrontation, as she's only in her 50s, meaning killing her next would be inhumane. But given the fact that she also has cancer, you would think they'd be okay with this and just keep going up by age, since they were just fine with automatically killing the elderly. But that's just it. They realize if they okay this, it'll just be the people in their 40s going next, and the whole age thing quits being okay. So I think we know who's dying next.
I'm just trying to help. Fuck you.
Okay, I'm pretty sure you ain't 50. I guess they really like the whole clockwise thing. They come to the conclusion that maybe they were picked for a specific reason, and if they tell each other about themselves, then they just might figure out that reason.
Great job. Who wants to go next?
Instead, they find out that admitting you don't have kids is a definite negative. while being husband and wife, on the other hand, is the exact opposite. The same can't be said for the foreign guy, who despite having kids deserves to die because he can't communicate.
I mean, I'll bet he's not even here legally.
Do you really think politics is a good idea?
While the rest of us were running away from the ships, he was probably running towards one going, Trabajo, trabajo!
You're dead. Literally no chance. Also, it turns out that actively admitting that you beat the shit out of your girlfriend is a bad idea, so he's out. The next assumption they make is that the whole thing is some kind of test to find out who deserves to live based on who they are and what they've done. This doesn't stop the black guy from playing the race card and accusing everybody of being racist. Even though they have clearly not been just choosing black people, but the cop takes things a bit too far.
I think we need to keep our personal prejudices out of this.
About fucking time you figured that out. Kinda like how they're not gonna stop this damn thing, but they devise a new plan anyway to tie the game, which fails. So they try again, revealing the fact that if they tie, you just have to vote again. And they finally reach the conclusion that most likely only one of them gets to live. And between the kid and the pregnant woman, it doesn't look too good for, anyone else.
Kill them both! Fucking kill them both!
Right, so I guess if you're a complete asshole, the whole death ray thing is even stronger. So some of the more decent people decide to sacrifice themselves, and I know I shouldn't laugh at this.
Thank you, Scott.
Fucking assholes. You know his name was Sean.
I can't help it. So, another notable dickhead makes fun of religion next, cause why not, and that somehow gets him through the next round. But his next assumption is a step too far. Luckily, the next notable dickhead surely has more common sense.
Two gay moms having sex all over the place? It's not as bad as two men, but it's still wrong.
Well, so much for leaving politics out of it. Don't think I need to explain how that turned out, and yet another revelation is formed, that once it comes down to two people, they would merely tie, meaning somebody would have to sacrifice themselves. 'Cause if you don't, well, then they both just die. This is demonstrated as the couple involved in an affair just happened to tie at this exact moment, and for some reason nobody breaks that tie.
Isn't that convenient?
At least they were interesting. I think they mentioned the affair one whole time. But this leads to a scenario in which the mean-looking blonde guy proposes that since only one of them can live, they best choose for them, ensuring they both don't die. Which is immediately called out as a trick to dispose of both of them, resulting in the group being divided. Half want to save them, and the other half want to save themselves.
Well, I think we all know what that means.
They deliberately kill people who aren't on their side to ensure their own survival.
They just killed her to get the majority back in their favor. They knew that she was on our side.
Well then why the fuck did you let that guy live this long? Apart from the blonde guy who only spoke recently, he's obviously the biggest prick here. Look at him! So the hero of the group demands that everybody on his side raise their hand. You know, so they can block vote them. Maybe just ask them to block vote, because they're clearly killing everybody who's not on their side. We just saw this. The foreign guy meets his demise next as he sacrifices himself upon tying with the kid, and the aforementioned biggest dick in the room kinda goes on a rant demanding they kill the kid while this happens. But that's okay, cause he seemingly has the majority on his side, as the loving husband desperately wants his wife to have a chance.
What are you doing?
No, don't do it. She's just a kid.
But she just couldn't go through with it, leaving only the mean-looking blonde guy as the primary antagonist. Well, than the aliens. He manages to get the majority on his side, meaning the army guy is next. But he has a plan to have them vote for the husband's wife, which would result in the two of them tying, unless he switches sides. So the black guy takes it instead. proving once again that politics get you nowhere. Still, something ain't quite right. Why would a couple be placed right next to each other? Could it just have been made up to enact sympathy? Well, assuming they were a couple, the aliens could have just abducted them together and put them there, or deliberately done it this way to create the aforementioned sympathy, kinda like with the kid and the pregnant woman, who technically didn't need to be in the same spot, but whatever. Still, it turns out they were lying, as he's one of the few people who revealed his name, and she doesn't know it.
Isn't that convenient?
And I guess it's the feminist route today. But not for long, as the divisiveness leads to a 5-way tie, leaving only the blonde guy. And it only takes one last suicide to give him the majority. He thinks he has it all wrapped up, but it turns out the mute fellow doesn't believe in voting, and assuming he was on his side was a bad idea. This leads the hero to have an assumption that perhaps him not voting has for some reason given him immunity. Which is obviously not true, and he just made this up to get the bad guy to vote for him. Which is pointless, as he's the only bad guy left. He's clearly lost the majority. And now there's no bad guys left, meaning the mute is the next to go, as it just had to be, leaving only the hero, the pregnant woman, and the kid. But in a shocking twist, the kid agrees to sacrifice himself for the baby. But in an even more shocking twist, it turns out he was lying the whole time, and uses this opportunity to kill them both, making him the sole survivor. And in yet another shocking twist, this doesn't stop it, meaning everyone dies. Yes, that's how most of these movies end, with a lazy, empty conclusion. But in actuality, the baby suddenly counts, which wasn't the case up until this point and changes nothing. He's not gonna feel guilty, he just killed the mother and the kid. He sure as shit ain't gonna care about the baby who would have died regardless. Plus, it can't vote, so what the fuck? I guess they wanted you to think he was gonna die too, but it doesn't justify a scene this dumb. Especially because the real ending is pretty satisfying too. As he does in fact survive, but is faced with the reality that a lot of people made the right decision and allowed the right person to live. And there he stands, staring at the ominous spaceship, with no explanation as to what the fuck happened. Only the realization that he is in fact the final dick. Apart from this guy, who I guess isn't bothered by this. And that was Circle. And apart from the pointless scene at the end with the baby all of a sudden, it's by no means a waste of time. Definitely not what I expected, but Circle is both engaging and, dare I say, satisfying. The biggest flaw with the movie is that it's somewhat too predictable who's gonna be bad just by looking at them. They may as well have a sign that reads giant dick. But I don't think that's really the point. This movie is primarily about suspense, and I know I keep saying this, the question of what would you do in this situation. And it handles those concepts very well. The movie is suspenseful, and you do commonly question who's gonna die next. It's usually the person you think, but occasionally it's not, and it leads to some pretty good moments. The fact that so many people die in such a fast rate could have been an issue, but in this case it succeeds in keeping the plot going. I'm not gonna complain about the politics, cause in this day and age that definitely would be a thing, especially to save yourself. But I do have to question some of the ways they bring these things up. As in, what could they have possibly hoped to gain by being as controversial as possible? It does kind of take you out of it. But apart from these flaws and a couple of nonsensical scenes, it's a pretty satisfying movie with a pretty satisfying ending, apart from that whole baby thing. It's definitely not groundbreaking, but if you want something that's somewhat meaningful, I advise checking this out, unless you really get offended easily. I'm the analyst, and remember kids, politics does not mix well with the life and death situation, especially if voting's involved.
Come on, please.
Oh, fuck, okay, yes, I'll switch. Fucking pick somebody else.
Wait. Right, all right, everybody vote for the black guy.
Wait, what? Fuck yeah, man!